No one can hurt you again, my princess.
I'm sorry for leaving you all alone with your father.
You are hereby sentenced to 15 years in prison, and you will be deported to your village of origin upon completion of your sentence.
The morning after Oluchi's arrest, Obi sat in his study surrounded by ringing phones he refused to answer. News of the scandal had spread like wildfire through Lagos's elite circles. By dawn, 3 business partners had called demanding explanations. By noon, his phone had logged 47 missed calls. The headlines were brutal. Billionaire's wife arrested for child abuse. Okafor empire in crisis as family secrets exposed. Socialite Oluchi faces 8 years for torturing stepdaughter. Emeka sat across from him, scrolling through social media on his tablet. It's everywhere. The story is trending. People are taking sides. Sides! Obi's voice was hoarse. He hadn't slept. There are no sides. She abused a child. You'd think so. Emeka turned the tablet around. But look. The comments section was a war zone. Many supported Adana and condemned Oluchi. But others, too many others, questioned the story. Why didn't the child speak up sooner? Rich men always blame the wife. Probably exaggerated for attention. He's trying to avoid paying alimony. Obi felt sick. They think I'm lying? Some do. Others think you're incompetent for not noticing. Others think both of you are lying for publicity. Emeka set down the tablet. This is what Oluchi warned you about. The court of public opinion doesn't require evidence. A knock interrupted them. Chinyu entered, her face worried. Sir, Adana won't come out of her room. She saw something on the internet, and now she's locked the door. Obi was on his feet immediately, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Outside Adana's bedroom, he knocked gently. Princess? It's me. Can I come in? Silence. Adana, please. Whatever you saw, we can talk about it. More silence. Then very quietly. They don't believe me. Obi's heart broke. Baby, open the door. Please. The lock clicked when Obi entered. He found his daughter sitting on her bed, her laptop open to a news article. The comments beneath were vicious. Spoiled rich kid making up stories. She probably got disciplined once and exaggerated. Attention seeker. Her real mother left for a reason. I told the truth, Adana whispered, tears streaming down her face. I told the truth, and they think I'm lying. Obi sat beside her and closed the laptop. The people who matter believe you. The police believe you. The doctor believes you. Uncle Emeka, Chinyu, me. We all believe you. Random strangers on the internet don't know you. They don't know what happened. Their opinions don't matter. But what if the jury doesn't believe me either? It was a question that had been haunting Obi since the arrest. What if, despite all the evidence, Oluchi's expensive lawyer managed to create reasonable doubt? What if the jury looked at a crying 13-year-old and saw manipulation instead of trauma? Then we deal with that. Obi said firmly, but Adana, listen to me. You telling the truth was the bravest thing you've ever done. Whatever happens in court, you did the right thing. And I'm proud of you. That afternoon, Obi's phone rang with a call he couldn't ignore. His largest business partner, Chief Okonkwo, a man whose investments had helped build the Okafor empire. Obi, we need to talk. Chief, this scandal, it's affecting business. 3 potential contracts have been delayed pending review of our partnership. 2 others have been canceled outright. The board wants to know what you're going to do about it. Do about it? Obi's voice hardened. My daughter was abused. I reported it. What exactly should I be doing differently? Handle it privately. Settle with the woman. Make it go away. Every day this stays in the news costs us money and reputation. Chief Okonkwo, with all due respect, my daughter's well-being is more important than your profit margin. Then perhaps we need to reconsider our partnership. The threat was clear. Obi thought about what that would mean. Chief Okonkwo's investment firm held significant stakes in 3 of his companies. A pullout could trigger a cascade of other investors fleeing. His empire could crumble. But when he closed his eyes, He saw Adana kneeling on that kitchen floor in her gray uniform, trembling with fear and starvation. Do what you need to do, Chief. I'm not settling. I'm not making this go away. That woman tortured my child, and she will face the full consequences of the law. The line went dead. Emeka, who'd been listening, let out a low whistle. That could cost you millions. I know, but you're doing it anyway. I have to. If I back down now, what message does that send to Adana? That money matters more than her? That reputation matters more than justice? I already failed her once. I won't fail her again. The next morning, Obi met with the prosecutor, Chioma Delik, a sharp woman in her 40s with a reputation for winning difficult cases. She laid out the timeline. Trial is set for 3 months from now. That gives us time to prepare, but it also gives Oluchi's team time to build their defense. She pulled out a folder. Her lawyer is Barrister Nwosu. He's good, expensive, known for discrediting witnesses, especially children. Can he win? Honestly, with the evidence we have, the videos, the medical reports, Chinyu's testimony, it should be a slam dunk. But juries are unpredictable, and Nwosu will paint Adana as troubled, attention-seeking, possibly coached by you. He'll claim the abuse was normal discipline exaggerated by a child traumatized by her mother's abandonment. So, what do? We prepare Adana. Thoroughly. She needs to be ready for Nwosu to attack her character, her credibility, her motives. It won't be pleasant. Over the next weeks, Adana met with Chioma regularly. The prosecutor was kind but realistic, walking her through the types of questions she'd face. He might ask why you didn't tell your teachers. Because Oluchi said they wouldn't believe me, that everyone would think I was making it up. He might ask why you performed so well on those video calls with your father, because she threatened to hurt me worse if I didn't. He might bring up your biological mother's abandonment and suggest you're emotionally unstable. Adana's hands clenched. I'm not unstable. I was being abused. I know that, but he's going to try to confuse the jury. You need to stay calm, stick to the facts, and tell the truth. Can you do that? Yes, Adana said, though her voice shook. 1 month before the trial, something unexpected happened. Obi's phone rang with an international number. London. His stomach dropped even before he answered. Obi, it's Zainab. His ex-wife, Adana's mother. The woman who'd abandoned them both and hadn't called in over 2 years. What do you want? I saw the news. About Oluchi and Adana. I'm flying to Lagos tomorrow. I need to see my daughter. Your daughter? Obi's voice was ice. The daughter you haven't called in 2 years? The daughter you left behind without a backward glance? That daughter? I made mistakes, Obi. I know that, but she's still my child. I need to know she's all right. Where was this concern for 2 years? Where was it when she needed her mother and you were off playing housewife to your British husband? Zainab's voice cracked. I thought she'd be better off without me. The divorce was ugly. I thought starting fresh, letting her have stability with you. Stability? I remarried someone who tortured her. She needed her mother, Zainab. She cried for you every night for months. And you never called. Not once. I know, and I'm sorry. But I'm coming now. I need to see her. That's not your choice anymore. It's hers. If Adana wants to see you, fine. If she doesn't, you get back on your plane. Understood? Understood. That evening, Obi sat Adana down and told her about the call. He watched her face carefully, trying to read her emotions. She was 13 now, still young, but older in ways that broke his heart. Trauma-age people. Your mother is coming to Lagos, he said gently. She wants to see you, but you don't have to see her if you're not ready. This is entirely your choice. Adana was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. Why now? Why does she suddenly care? I don't know, baby. Maybe the news made her realize what she'd missed. Maybe guilt. Maybe she genuinely wants to make amends. But her motivations don't matter as much as your feelings. What do you want? I don't know, Adana admitted. Part of me wants to see her, to ask her why she left, to tell her how much it hurt. But part of me is scared. What if she leaves again? What if seeing her makes everything worse? Those are very valid concerns. What do you think I should do? Obi chose his words carefully. I think you should do whatever feels right for you. If you want to see her, I'll be there with you. If you don't, I'll tell her no. There's no wrong answer here. Can I think about it? Of course. 2 days later, Adana made her decision. I'll see her, but only if you're there, and only for an hour. And if it gets too hard, we leave. Deal. Zainab arrived at the Okafor mansion on a humid Tuesday afternoon. Obi answered the door and barely recognized his ex-wife. She looked older, thinner, with shadows under her eyes that matched Adana's. Guilt, he thought, or stress, or maybe just the weight of consequences. Thank you for letting me come, Zainab said quietly. I'm not doing this for you. They sat in the living room, the same room where so much had unfolded. Chinya brought tea that no one touched. And then Adana entered, moving slowly, her body language defensive. Mother and daughter stared at each other across the room. Adana, Zainab breathed. You've grown so much. That's what happens in 2 years. The bitterness in her young voice was devastating. Zainab flinched but pressed on. I saw the news about what that woman did to you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't here to protect you. You weren't here because you chose not to be, Adana said flatly. You left me. You married someone else and moved to another country and never called. Not on my birthday. Not on Christmas. Never. I thought, Zainab's voice broke, I thought you'd be better off without me. Your father and I, we destroyed each other. Our marriage was toxic. I thought removing myself would give you peace. You didn't remove yourself. You abandoned me. There's a difference. You're right. You're absolutely right. Tears streamed down Zainab's face. I was a coward. I was hurting and broken, and I ran away. I told myself it was for your good, but really, I just couldn't face my failure as a mother and a wife. I'm sorry, Adana. I'm so sorry. Adana's own eyes filled with tears. Do you know what it was like? Having my mother leave me and never look back? Do you know how worthless that made me feel? When Oluchi started hurting me, part of me thought I deserved it. Because if my own mother didn't want me, maybe I really was worthless. Zainab made a sound like a wounded animal. No, baby, you were never worthless. None of this was your fault. Not my leaving, not Oluchi's abuse. You are precious and valuable, and I should have told you that every single day. I failed you, but I'm here now. I want to make it right. How? Adana's voice rose. How do you make right 2 years of abandonment? 2 years of wondering why I wasn't good enough for my own mother to love. I can't, Zainab admitted. I can't undo the past, but I can be here now. I can try to rebuild a relationship. If you'll let me, I'm not asking for instant forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for a chance. To be your mother again, to earn back your trust. Adana looked at her father. Obi kept his face neutral, letting her make this choice herself. Finally, she turned back to Zainab. I can't promise anything, Adana said. I can't promise I'll forgive you or that we'll have a relationship, but you can call me once a week. We'll talk, and maybe eventually we'll figure out if there's anything left to rebuild. Thank you, Zainab whispered. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. After Zainab left, Obi found Adana in her room, staring out the window. How do you feel? Confused, angry, sad, relieved? I don't know. She seemed genuinely sorry. She should be. You think she'll actually call every week? I don't know, but if she doesn't, that's on her. Not you. Dad. Yeah. Thank you for being here, for staying, even when it's hard, even when it costs you. She'd noticed the news reports about his business troubles, though he tried to shield her from them. You're worth any cost, Obi said simply. Always. 2 weeks before the trial, Barrister Nwosu made a surprise move. He requested a meeting with the prosecution to discuss a potential plea deal. Absolutely not. was Obi's immediate response when Chioma told him. "Hear me out," the prosecutor said. "Nwosu knows his client is guilty. He knows we have overwhelming evidence. So he's proposing Oluchi plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for a shorter sentence. Maybe 4 years instead of 8. No. Obi, if we go to trial, there's always risk. What if something goes wrong? What if a juror has sympathy for her? What if we accept this deal and Adana sees her abuser get half the punishment she deserves? What message does that send? That abusing children is only so wrong? That if you're rich enough to hire a good lawyer, you can negotiate down the consequences?" Chioma sighed. "I understand your anger. This isn't anger. This is principle. That woman tortured my daughter for 18 months. She starved her, beat her, locked her in dark rooms, made her sleep on a mat like an animal. And you want me to let her off easy? I want to guarantee a conviction. Plea deals eliminate risk. Then let's eliminate the risk by being so well prepared that the jury has no choice but to convict. You said yourself we have overwhelming evidence. Use it. Make the case so airtight that Nwosu has nothing to work with." Chioma studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled slightly. "All right, we'll reject the plea. We're going to trial. But Obi, you need to prepare yourself and Adana. This is going to get ugly. Nwosu will throw everything he can at her credibility. It's going to be brutal. She's stronger than people think, than I ever gave her credit for. She'll handle it." He believed it. He had to believe it. Because in 2 weeks, his daughter would walk into a courtroom and face her abuser, and he needed her to know he had complete faith in her courage, even if he was terrified for her, even if part of him wondered if he'd made the right choice, putting her through this ordeal instead of accepting the plea deal. But when he looked at Adana that evening, saw the determination in her eyes, the steel that had been forged through suffering, he knew this was the right choice. Justice wasn't supposed to be easy, but it was always worth fighting for. The trial is coming and tensions are high. Will Adana hold up under aggressive cross-examination? Will Oluchi's lawyer manage to create reasonable doubt? And what role will Zaina play in all this drama? Don't miss the next chapter, where the courtroom battle begins. Like this video. Subscribe to African Tales by Zion and turn on notifications so you don't miss the explosive trial. Drop your predictions in the comments. The Lagos High Court was packed to capacity on the first day of trial. Media crews lined hallways, held back by security. Photographers jostled for position outside. Inside the courtroom, every seat was filled with journalists, curious onlookers, and child welfare advocates who'd made this case their cause. Obi sat in the front row directly behind the prosecution table, his hand firmly clasping Adana's. His daughter wore a simple blue dress. Chioma had advised something modest and age-appropriate. Her hair was braided neatly. She wore no makeup. She looked exactly like what she was, a 13-year-old child. Across the aisle, Oluchi sat with Barrister Nwosu, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. She wore traditional Igbo attire in deep purple, her head wrapped elegantly. She looked respectable, dignified, nothing like a child abuser. That was the problem, Obi thought. Monsters rarely look like monsters. The bailiff called for order. All rise for the Honorable Justice Adebayo. Judge Adebayo entered. A stern-faced woman in her 60s known for running a tight courtroom and having zero tolerance for theatrics. She'd heard it all, seen it all, and had a reputation for being scrupulously fair. After preliminary proceedings, Chioma Delik stood to deliver her opening statement. Your Honor, members of the jury, this is a case about trust betrayed in the most horrific way possible. You will hear how the defendant, Oluchi Okafor, systematically abused a vulnerable 12-year-old child for 18 months. You will see evidence, video recordings, medical reports, testimony from witnesses that proves beyond any reasonable doubt that Oluchi Okafor tortured Adana Okafor while her father was away on business trips. Chioma's voice was clear and firm. The defense will try to paint this as a case of a troubled child seeking attention. They will point to biological mother's abandonment as evidence of emotional instability. They will suggest that normal discipline was exaggerated into abuse. But the evidence tells a different story. A story of systematic cruelty, of starvation, of beatings, of psychological torture. And at the end of this trial, I am confident you will find Oluchi Okafor guilty of every charge against her. Barrister Nwosu stood next, his posture relaxed, his voice smooth. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is indeed about betrayal, but not the kind the prosecution suggests. This is a case where a loving stepmother tried her best to raise a difficult, traumatized child, and that child, desperate for the attention of her absent father, fabricated a tale of abuse. You will hear that Adana Okafor's biological mother abandoned her, that she has a history of behavioral problems, that she resented my client for not being her real mother. The prosecution has videos, yes, but context matters. What looks like discipline to one person might look like abuse to another. What looks like consequences for misbehavior might be twisted by a clever child into evidence of cruelty. I ask you to keep an open mind and remember that children, especially traumatized children, are not always reliable narrators of their own lives. Adana's hand tightened in Obi's. He squeezed back, whispering, "Lies, all lies. The jury will see the truth." The prosecution began building their case methodically. First, they called Dr. Adeyemi, the physician who'd examined Adana the night of her rescue. "What did you observe when you examined Adana Okafor?" Chioma asked. Dr. Adeyemi pulled out his report. The child was severely malnourished. Her weight was in the 5th percentile for her age. She showed signs of chronic dehydration. I documented multiple contusions in various stages of healing, suggesting repeated trauma over an extended period. She had bruising on her arms, back, and shoulders consistent with being struck with a blunt object. Her psychological state was fragile. She exhibited signs of severe anxiety and trauma. In your medical opinion, could these injuries have been accidental? No. The pattern and placement of injuries, combined with the malnutrition and psychological state, are consistent with sustained physical and emotional abuse. Barrister Nwosu cross-examined. Dr. Adeyemi, you stated the child was in the 5th percentile for weight, but some children are naturally thin, are they not? Yes, but... And bruises. Children get bruises. They fall. They play. They're clumsy. Isn't that true? These were not play injuries. The pattern. But you can't say with absolute certainty that every single bruise came from abuse, can you? Given the totality of evidence. Please answer question. Can you say with absolute certainty? Dr. Adeyemi's jaw tightened. No physician can claim absolute certainty about anything, but I am highly confident. Highly confident is not beyond reasonable doubt. Thank you, Doctor. No further questions. Obi watched the jury's faces. Were they convinced? It was impossible to tell. Next came Chinyu. The former housekeeper took the stand with quiet dignity, her voice steady as she recounted what she'd witnessed. I worked for Mr. Okafor for 8 years before Mrs. Oluchi fired me, Chinyu said. In my last months there, I saw things that troubled me. I would arrive for work and find Adana scrubbing floors in a gray uniform I'd never seen before. She was always thin, always tired. Once, I found her eating scraps from the garbage. When I asked her about it, she begged me not to say anything. She was terrified. Why didn't you report this? Chioma asked. I tried to talk to Mr. Okafor once, but Mrs. Oluchi overheard and fired me that same day. I continued bringing food to Adana when I could, but I was afraid. I have children of my own to feed. I needed work. I'm ashamed to say I didn't do more. Tears streamed down Chinyu's face. I should have fought harder for her, but I was scared of losing everything. I'm so sorry. Barrister Nwosu approached. Miss Chinyu, you were fired by my client. That must have made you angry. I was angry at myself for not protecting that child, but also angry at Mrs. Okafor for dismissing you, I suppose. Angry enough to exaggerate what you saw, to take revenge through false testimony. Chinyu's eyes flashed. I am testifying under oath before God. Everything I said is the truth. That woman tortured a child, and I will carry the guilt of not stopping for the rest of my life. Or, Nwosu suggested smoothly, you saw normal discipline and through the lens of your anger about being fired, reinterpreted it as abuse. No, what I saw was abuse. Clear abuse. That's your interpretation. Thank you. No further questions. The testimony continued. The prosecutor called a neighbor who testified she'd heard sounds of crying and shouting from the Okafor home. A teacher who said Adana had become withdrawn and anxious over the past year. A social worker who explained the psychological patterns of abused children. But the prosecution's most powerful evidence came on day 3. The videos. Emeka took the stand and explained how he'd hired a private investigator after becoming suspicious of Oluchi's treatment of his niece. The investigator had set up hidden cameras around the property's perimeter. The courtroom lights dimmed. The first video began to play. It showed Oluchi through the kitchen window, screaming at a small figure in a gray uniform. Adana was on her knees, scrubbing the floor. Oluchi's hand came down hard across the girl's back. Once, twice, 3 times. Adana curled into a protective ball, and the audio picked up her pleading. "I'm sorry, Ma. I'm sorry. Please, I'll do better." Several jury members visibly recoiled. The second video was worse. It showed Oluchi throwing food into the garbage while Adana watched, clearly hungry. "You don't deserve to eat today." Oluchi's voice came through clearly. "Lazy girls don't get food." The third video showed Adana being shoved into the storage room, the door locked behind her. Her crying could be heard through the walls. By the time the videos finished, several people in the courtroom were crying. 2 jury members were visibly upset. And Oluchi sat stone-faced, her mask finally cracking to show the fury beneath. Barrister Nwosu did his best on cross-examination. "Mr. Emeka, you hired a private investigator to spy on your brother's wife. That seems invasive. I was protecting my niece. Or you want to destroy your brother's marriage because you never approved of it. I wanted to save a child from abuse." These videos showed discipline. Perhaps harsh by today's standards, but discipline nonetheless. Those videos show a woman beating and starving a child. Emeka said firmly, "There's no other interpretation." On day 4, it was Adana's turn to testify. Obi watched his daughter walk to the witness stand, her steps measured and careful. She looked so small up there, dwarfed by the formal setting. But when she raised her right hand to swear the oath, her voice was clear. "I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God." Chioma approached gently. "Adana, I know this is difficult. Take your time. Can you tell the court what happened when your father would leave for business trips?" Adana took a deep breath, and then, in a voice that started quiet but grew stronger with each sentence, she told her story. She told them about the gray uniform, about sleeping on a mat in the storage room, about the beatings with a wooden spoon, about going days without proper food, about being locked in dark spaces for hours, about the coach video calls where she had to smile and lie, while Oluchi stood behind the camera with threats in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell your father?" Chioma asked gently. "I tried once, but Oluchi said no one would believe me. She said I was just a troubled child missing her real mother. She said if I told, she'd make it worse." Adana's voice cracked. "And the one time I hinted something was wrong, my father believed her over me, so I stopped trying." "What changed?" "My father came home early. He saw it with his own eyes. He finally saw what she really was." Chioma had no further questions. Now came the part everyone had been dreading. Barrister Nwosu's cross-examination. The silver-haired lawyer approached the witness stand with a gentle smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Adana, I know this is hard, but I need to ask you some questions. Is that all right?" "Yes, sir. Your biological mother left when you were 10 years old. That must have been very painful. It was... You cried a lot. You had nightmares. You were depressed. Isn't that true?" "Yes. And when your father remarried, you resented it. You didn't want a new mother. You wanted your real mother back. At first, maybe, but then... Yes or no, please. Did you resent your father remarrying?" "A little, but..." "Thank you. Now, you claim my client beat you. But children often exaggerate discipline into abuse, don't they?" "She didn't discipline me. She tortured me. Or did she set rules and boundaries at you as a grieving, angry child perceived as torture? Isn't it possible you're confused about what really happened? No. Adana's voice was firm. I'm not confused. She beat me. She starved me. She locked me in dark rooms. She told me I was worthless. I know what happened to me. But you performed perfectly on those video calls with your father. You smiled. You laughed. You looked happy. If you were truly being abused, why were you able to act so normal? Because she threatened to hurt me worse if I didn't. She stood right behind the camera and told me exactly what to say. Or were those calls genuine? Were you actually happy, and now you're rewriting history to get attention from your father? No. Adana's voice rose. I was terrified during those calls. I was pretending because I was scared. You're pretending now too, aren't you? Pretending to be a victim when really, you're just an angry teenager who didn't like having rules and consequences. That's not true. Judge Adebayo intervened. Barrister Nwosu, you're badgering the witness. Apologies, Your Honor. Nwosu softened his tone. Adana, isn't it true that you wanted your father's attention? That you felt neglected because of his constant business trips? Yes, but... And isn't it true that making these accusations got you that attention? Your father quit traveling. He's home every night now. He focuses entirely on you. Isn't that what you wanted all along? Tears streamed down Adana's face. I wanted my father to protect me. I wanted someone to make her stop hurting me. That's all I ever wanted. Or you wanted to destroy your stepmother because she wasn't your real mother, because you blamed her for your biological mother's absence. No, I blamed her for hurting me, because she did hurt me, every day for 18 months. Nwosu leaned forward. You're lying, aren't you, Adana? Making up stories to hurt an innocent woman who tried her best to care for you. No, I'm telling the truth. Why won't you believe me? Adana was sobbing now, her composure shattered. Obi half rose from his seat, desperate to protect his daughter from this verbal assault. Emeka pulled him back down, whispering urgently, "Let Chioma handle it." The prosecutor stood. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is harassing the witness." Sustained. Barrister Nwosu, rephrase or move on. Nwosu smiled. No further questions. As Adana left the witness stand, trembling and crying, Obi finally understood what Chioma had meant about this being brutal. His daughter had just been put through an ordeal almost as traumatic as the original abuse. Her credibility attacked, her motives questioned, her truth called lies. But when he caught her eye as she returned to her seat beside him, he saw something unexpected. Not defeat, but determination. She'd survived Nwosu's cross-examination. She'd told her truth despite the attacks. And the jury had seen her genuine distress, her authentic pain. The trial continued for another week. The defense called character witnesses for Oluchi, friends who testified she'd always seemed kind and generous. A pastor who said she was a devoted church member. Neighbors who claimed they'd never heard anything unusual from the Okafor home. But none of them could explain away the videos. None of them could counter the medical evidence. None of them had been there during those 18 months of secret torture. Finally, both sides rested. Closing arguments were scheduled for the next day. That night, Obi found Adana in her room, staring at the ceiling. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, but lighter somehow. Like I've carried something heavy for so long, and now I've finally put it down." "You were so brave today. The way you held up under Nwosu's questions, I was in awe. He tried to make me doubt myself, to make me think maybe I was crazy or lying or exaggerating. But I'm not. I know what happened to me, and nothing he said can change that truth. I'm so proud of you." Adana turned to look at her father. "Do you think the jury believed me?" "I think they saw a brave young woman telling her truth despite enormous pressure. I think they saw the videos and the medical evidence and heard Chinyu's testimony. I think they're going to do the right thing. And if they don't..." Obi had thought about this. The possibility that despite everything, Oluchi might walk free. Then we appeal. We keep fighting. We don't give up until justice is served. But Adana, no matter what the verdict is, You did everything right. You spoke up. You told the truth. You faced your abuser. That takes incredible courage, and I'm honored to be your father." Adana smiled, a real smile, the first genuine one in days. "I'm glad you finally see me. The real me, not the perfect daughter pretending everything is fine, but the real me with all my scars and fears and trauma. You see me and you're still here. I'll always be here," Obi promised. "From now on, I'll always be here." Tomorrow would bring closing arguments and then jury deliberations. Tomorrow would determine whether Oluchi faced justice or walked free. Tomorrow would shape the rest of both their lives. But tonight, father and daughter sat together in comfortable silence, holding on to hope in each other, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. The trial testimony is done. Adana was so brave facing her abuser, and that brutal cross-examination. But will the jury believe her? Don't miss the next chapter, where we get the verdict. Will Oluchi face justice or walk free? Like this video. Subscribe to African Tales by Zion, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the dramatic conclusion. What do you think the verdict will be? Drop your predictions. The courtroom was even more packed on the day of closing arguments. Word had spread that this was the final stage before deliberations, and everyone wanted to witness the dramatic conclusion. Obi arrived early with Adana, both of them exhausted from a sleepless night, spent worrying about what was to come. Chioma Adeli stood first for the prosecution's closing argument. She moved to stand directly in front of the jury box, making eye contact with each member. Members of the jury, over the past 2 weeks you've heard testimony and seen evidence that proves, beyond any reasonable doubt, that Oluchi Okafor systematically abused a vulnerable child for 18 months. You've seen video footage of her striking that child, starving that child, verbally assaulting that child. You've heard medical testimony confirming severe malnutrition and repeated physical trauma. You've heard from a witness who saw the abuse firsthand. And you've heard from the victim herself, a brave young woman who, despite aggressive questioning and attempts to discredit her, told you the truth about what happened to her. Chioma's voice grew stronger. The defense wants you to believe this is a story about a troubled teenager seeking attention. But ask yourselves, what child would voluntarily endure the humiliation and trauma of a public trial just for attention? What child would subject herself to the kind of brutal cross-examination you witnessed just to hurt her stepmother? The answer is none. Children don't fabricate detailed, consistent accounts of systematic abuse that perfectly match video evidence and medical findings. They simply don't. She paused, letting that sink in. The defense claims this was discipline, not abuse. But there is no universe in which starving a 12-year-old child is discipline. There is no interpretation of parenthood that includes beating a child with a wooden spoon until she's covered in bruises. There is no definition of care that involves locking a traumatized child in a dark storage room for hours at a time. Chioma walked back toward the prosecution table, then turned. Oluchi Okafor had a choice. When Mr. Okafor entrusted his precious daughter to her care, she could have chosen to love that child, to nurture her, to help her heal from the abandonment she'd suffered. Instead, she chose cruelty. She chose to exploit that child's vulnerability. She chose to torture her while hiding behind a mask of respectability. Your job now is simple. Look at the evidence. Listen to your conscience. And deliver the verdict that justice demands. Find Oluchi Okafor guilty on all charges. Give Adana Okafor the validation she deserves. And send a message that in this society, those who abuse vulnerable children will be held accountable. Thank you. The courtroom was silent as Chioma sat down. Several jury members were visibly moved, their faces tight with emotion. Now it was Barrister Nwosu's turn. The silver-haired lawyer stood slowly, projecting an air of calm reasonableness. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have indeed heard a lot of testimony over these past 2 weeks. And I'm sure many of you feel sympathy for Adana Okafor. She's a young girl who's been through genuine trauma. Her mother abandoned her. Her father was often absent, and yes, she struggled under the care of a stepmother she never fully accepted. Nwosu paced thoughtfully. But sympathy is not evidence. Emotion is not proof. Your job is not to feel sorry for Adana. Your job is to determine whether the prosecution has proven, beyond reasonable doubt, that my client committed the crime she's been accused of. Let's look at the facts without the emotional manipulation. Yes, there are videos showing my client disciplining Adana, but discipline and abuse are not the same thing. Different cultures, different families have different standards for what constitutes appropriate correction of a child's behavior. What the prosecution calls abuse, many would call old-fashioned but effective parenting. Several people in the gallery made sounds of disbelief, quickly silenced by the judge. Furthermore, Nwosu continued, we've established that Adana is a traumatized child with reason to resent my client. Her biological mother abandoned her. She was angry. She wanted her father's attention. Is it so hard to believe that she exaggerated normal discipline into systematic abuse? That she took the natural conflicts that occur in any blended family and turned them into a dramatic narrative that would guarantee her father would finally prioritize her over his business? The medical evidence is ambiguous at best. Yes, Adana was thin, but some children are naturally thin. Yes, she had bruises, but children get bruises from normal activities. The prosecution wants you to see sinister intent in everything, but sometimes the simplest explanation is a correct one. This was a stepmother doing her best with a difficult, grieving child who resented her presence. Nwosu moved closer to the jury. I'm not asking you to believe my client is perfect. I'm asking you to question whether the prosecution has truly proven their case beyond reasonable doubt. They've shown you videos that could be interpreted multiple ways. They presented a child's testimony. But children, especially traumatized ones, can be unreliable. They brought forward a fired housekeeper with an axe to grind. Is that really enough to destroy a woman's life? To send her to prison for 8 years? I submit to you that it is not. The prosecution has presented a narrative, yes, an emotional story designed to tug at your heartstrings. But stories are not facts. Allegations are not proof. And reasonable doubt exists all throughout this case. I ask you to look past the emotion, examine the evidence objectively, and return a verdict of not guilty. Thank you. As Nwosu sat down, Obi felt his stomach churn. Had the defense lawyer created enough doubt? Would the jury question whether Adana was telling the truth? Judge Adebayo addressed the jury. Members of the jury, you've heard the evidence and the arguments. You will now retire to deliberate. Remember, your verdict must be based solely on the evidence presented in this courtroom, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Bailiff, please escort the jury to the deliberation room. The jury filed out. The courtroom erupted into conversation. Obi, Adana, Emeka, and Chioma retreated to a private room to wait. How long do you think they'll be? Adana asked. Hard to say, Chioma replied. Could be hours. Could be days. Juries are unpredictable. But we have a strong case, right? We have an incredibly strong case. The videos alone should be enough. But I won't lie to you, Nwosu is good. He planted seeds of doubt. Some jurors might latch onto that. The waiting was agony. Hours crawled by. Obi tried to work, gave up, tried to read, gave up, ended up just pacing. Adana alternated between nervous energy and exhausted collapse. Emeka kept him supplied with food. No one wanted in coffee, everyone needed. 6 hours passed. Then 7. Then 8. Is this good or bad? Obi asked Chioma. It means they're taking it seriously. Thoroughly discussing the evidence. It could go either way. At 7:32 p.m., word came. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom refilled quickly. Obi held Adana's hand tightly as they returned to their seats. His daughter was trembling, her face pale. Whatever happens, he whispered, I'm proud of you. You were brave. You told the truth. That matters more than any verdict. But even as he said it, he prayed desperately that the verdict would be the right one. Judge Adebayo returned to the bench. Has the jury reached a verdict? The jury foreman, a middle-aged woman in glasses, stood. We have, Your Honor. What say you? The courtroom held its collective breath. On the charge of child abuse, we find the defendant, Oluchi Okafor, guilty. Adana gasped. Obi squeezed her hand tighter. On the charge of child endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. Oluchi's face remained expressionless, but her hands clenched the table. On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On all additional charges, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Some people cheered. Others cried. Media representatives rushed for the exits to file their stories. Through it all, Obi could only stare at his daughter's face, watching his years of pain and fear transformed into something like relief. Guilty, Adana whispered. They believe me. They actually believe me. Judge Adebayo banged her gavel for order. The defendant is remanded into custody pending sentencing, which will occur in 2 weeks. This court is adjourned. As bailiffs moved to handcuff Oluchi, she finally broke. She turned to face Adana across the courtroom, her mask of civility completely shattered. "You little brat," she shrieked. "You've ruined my life. You ungrateful, worthless." "That's enough." Judge Adebayo commanded. "Remove the defendant immediately." As Oluchi was dragged from the courtroom, still screaming obscenities, Adana watched with an expression of profound sadness rather than triumph. "I thought I'd feel happy," she said quietly to her father. "But I just feel tired and sad. She could have loved me. She could have been the mother I needed, but she chose cruelty instead. And now her life is ruined because of her own choices." "That's very mature of you," Obi said, "and very kind. More kind than she deserves." Outside the courthouse, media swarmed them. Microphones were shoved in their faces. Questions were shouted. "Mr. Okafor, how do you feel about the verdict?" "Adana, what do you want to say to other abuse victims? Will you pursue civil damages?" Chioma stepped forward as their spokesperson. "Justice has been served today." Adana Okafor showed incredible courage in speaking her truth, and the jury recognized that truth. "We hope this verdict sends a clear message that child abuse will not be tolerated in our society, regardless of the perpetrator's wealth or social standing. Thank you." That night, the Okafor home was filled with celebration and relief. Emeka brought champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Adana. Chinyu cooked Adana's favorite foods. Dr. Ngozi, Adana's therapist, stopped by to congratulate her. "How do you feel?" Dr. Ngozi asked during a quiet moment. "Validated," Adana said. "Like I wasn't crazy. Like what happened to me was real and wrong and not my fault." The jury believed me. 12 strangers listened to my story and said, "Yes, you were abused. It wasn't okay." That's huge. How's the nightmares? Still having them. But maybe they'll get better now that there's been justice. Maybe. But remember, healing isn't linear. The verdict helps, but the real work of recovery takes time. I know, but at least now I can heal knowing that what happened to me mattered, that society cared enough to hold her accountable. 2 weeks later, they returned for sentencing. Judge Adebayo, who'd reviewed all the evidence and victim impact statements, delivered her judgment with stern authority. "Mrs. Oluchi Okafor, you've been found guilty of systematically abusing a vulnerable child entrusted to your care. The evidence showed a pattern of cruelty that is truly shocking in its deliberateness. You exploited Mr. Okafor's trust in his necessary absences to torture his daughter, and you did so with calculation and malice. Child abuse is among the most serious crimes in our society because children are utterly dependent on adults for their survival and well-being. When adults betray that trust, the damage can last a lifetime. You had the opportunity to help heal a child wounded by her mother's abandonment. Instead, you inflicted wounds that will take years to heal. In determining your sentence, I consider the severity of the abuse, its duration, the victim's age and vulnerability, and your complete lack of remorse. I hereby sentence you to the maximum, 8 years in prison on the child abuse charge, to run consecutively with 5 years for child endangerment and 2 years for fraud. Total sentence, 15 years in prison." Gasps filled the courtroom. 15 years, more than the prosecution had even asked for. Furthermore, Judge Adebayo continued, "Upon completion of your sentence, you will be deported to your village of origin and permanently barred from working with children in any capacity. You will also pay restitution to the victim for medical expenses and therapy costs. Do you have anything to say?" Oluchi stood, her face hard. Yes, Your Honor. That girl destroyed my life with her lies. I will appeal this verdict, and the truth will come out. You're entitled to appeal. But I warn you, the evidence against you is overwhelming. I've rarely seen a case with such clear proof of guilt. Bailiff, remove the prisoner. As Oluchi was led away for the last time, Adana felt something shift inside her. The monster who'd haunted her nightmares for so long was finally, truly gone. Not just arrested, imprisoned. Not just charged, convicted, and sentenced. Justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, they were again mobbed by media. This time, Adana asked to make a statement herself. Standing at the microphone, looking so much older than her 13 years, she spoke clearly. I want to say something to other children who might be going through what I went through. If someone is hurting you, it's not your fault. You're not bad or worthless or deserving of abuse. You deserve safety and love and protection. Speaking up is scary. I know that. I was terrified to tell my story. But I'm so glad I did, because now the person who hurt me can't hurt anyone else. So please, if you're being abused, tell someone. Tell a teacher, a neighbor, a relative, the police. Keep telling until someone listens and helps. And to the adults watching this, believe children when they tell you they're being hurt. Pay attention to warning signs. Don't assume everything is fine just because it looks fine on the surface. My father thought our home was perfect because my abuser was very good at hiding the truth. But if he'd looked closer, if he'd trusted his instincts, maybe I would have suffered for less time. I'm not saying this to blame my father. He's been amazing since he found out the truth. I'm saying it to remind everyone that protecting children is everyone's responsibility. Thank you. The statement went viral. News outlets across the world picked it up. Child protection organizations invited Adana to speak. Her courage inspired other abuse victims to come forward. But for Adana, the most important moment came 3 days after sentencing. She was sitting in Dr. Ngozi's office for their regular session when the therapist asked, "Have you had any nightmares since the sentencing?" Adana paused, considering. "Actually, no, I haven't. Not one." "How does that feel?" "Like I can finally breathe. Like this weight I've been carrying, this fear that she'd somehow come back, that she'd hurt me again, is finally gone. She's in prison. She can't reach me. And for the first time in 2 years, I feel safe." Dr. Ngozi smiled. "That's wonderful progress. But remember, I know, healing isn't linear. Trauma doesn't disappear overnight. I'll probably still have hard days and triggers and moments where I struggle. But right now, in this moment, I feel free. And that's enough." That evening, Obi found Adana in her art studio, painting. The canvas showed a girl breaking free from chains, sunlight streaming down on her face. "Is that you?" he asked. "It's every abuse survivor who finds the courage to speak up," Adana said. "Every kid who refuses to stay silent. Every person who chooses healing over hiding." Obi stood beside his daughter, both of them looking at the powerful image. "I'm so proud of you, not just for testifying or for getting justice, but for who you're becoming. You're turning your pain into purpose. I learned from you. You could have taken the easy way out, paid Oluchi off, avoided the scandal. But you chose justice, even when it was hard, even when it cost you business relationships and money. You taught me that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. I'm still learning that lesson," Obi admitted. "I did take the easy way out for too long. I prioritized my business over being present for you. I trusted the wrong person. I failed you in so many ways. But you're here now, and you chose me when it mattered most. That's what I'll remember." Father and daughter stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set through the studio windows. Outside, life went on. The media frenzy would eventually die down. Business would recover, or it wouldn't. Zainab would continue her weekly calls, or she wouldn't. But inside this room, in this moment, Obi and Adana had something precious. Peace. Justice. A chance to move forward together. The nightmare was finally, truly over, and the healing could begin. Justice served. 15 years in prison. Adana finally got the validation and protection she deserved. But the journey isn't over yet. How will she heal from this trauma? What happens to her relationship with Zainab? Don't miss the final chapter where we see Adana's journey to healing and recovery. Like this video, subscribe to African Tales by Zion, and turn on notifications for the powerful conclusion. Drop a comment about how you felt seeing justice served. 6 months after the trial, Adana sat in Dr. Ngozi's office for what had become a routine part of her life. Therapy every week, sometimes twice when things were particularly difficult. Tell me about the panic attack you had on Tuesday, Dr. Ngozi said gently. Adana pulled her knees up to her chest. At 13 and a half, she'd gained back most of the weight she'd lost, and her face had lost that hollow, haunted quality. But the psychological scars were deeper and took longer to heal. I was at the grocery store with Aunt Patience, Adana said. We were in the cleaning supplies aisle, and I saw a wooden spoon, just a cooking utensil. But suddenly I was back in that kitchen, and I could feel her hitting me, and I couldn't breathe. Aunt Patience had to take me outside. I was so embarrassed. Panic attacks aren't something to be embarrassed about. They're your body's response to trauma. The wooden spoon was a trigger. It brought back the memories and the fear your body experienced during the abuse. That's completely normal for trauma survivors. Will it always be like this? Well, I always freak out over random things. The triggers will lessen over time as you continue processing the trauma. Some may never fully go away, but you'll learn coping mechanisms to manage them. You're already doing better than 6 months ago, aren't you? Adana nodded reluctantly. I guess. I can sleep in my own room now without someone sitting outside the door. I can eat full meals without panicking that someone will take the food away. I don't flinch every time I hear footsteps anymore. Those are significant victories. Celebrate them. It's just, sometimes I get frustrated. I want to be normal again. I want to be the girl I was before Oluchi, before my mom left, before everything got complicated. You can't go back to who you were, Dr. Ngozi said honestly. Trauma changes us. But that doesn't mean you can't be happy or whole. It just means you're different now. And different isn't bad, it's just different. At home, Obi was learning the same lesson. He'd kept his promise to drastically reduce his travel, but running a business empire still required work. He'd hired additional executives to handle most international trips, and when he absolutely had to travel, he kept it to 2 or 3 days maximum. But even with him home most evenings, the father-daughter relationship required constant rebuilding. One night at dinner, Adana went quiet. Obi noticed immediately. He learned to watch for the subtle signs of distress. What's wrong, princess? Nothing. Adana. She set down her fork. I had a meeting with the school counselor today. She wants me to consider joining the peer support group for students dealing with family trauma. That sounds good. Are you going to do it? I don't know. It means telling people what happened to me. Right now, most kids at school don't know. They know I testified in some trial, but not the details. If I join that group, people will know I was abused. Obi considered this carefully. What do you want to do? Part of me wants to help other kids who are going through similar things. I know what it's like to feel alone and scared. Maybe I could make a difference. She paused. But part of me just wants to be normal, to be known for things other than being that girl who was abused. Those are both valid feelings. There's no wrong choice here. What would you do? Honestly, I'd ask myself what I'd regret more. Staying silent when I could have helped someone, or speaking up and dealing with the discomfort of being more public about my trauma. Only you can answer that question for yourself. Adana thought about it for several days. Finally, she decided to join the group. Her first meeting was terrifying. 8 other students sat in a circle with a counselor, all dealing with various family traumas: divorce, death, abuse, abandonment. When it was Adana's turn to share, her voice shook. My name is Adana. My stepmom abused me for 18 months. She's in prison now. I thought after the trial, everything would be better, but I still have nightmares and panic attacks. I still feel broken sometimes. A girl across the circle, Ngozi, coincidentally sharing the therapist's name, spoke up. I feel broken too. My dad beat my mom for years before she finally left him. Even though we're safe now, I still flinch when men raise their voices. I still feel like it's my fault somehow. It's not your fault, Adana said immediately. Neither is what happened to you, Ngozi countered. Something in that exchange, the simple act of being heard and hearing others, of recognizing shared experience, was profoundly healing. Adana continued attending the group every week. Meanwhile, Zainab had kept her promise of weekly calls. The conversations were still awkward, still painful, but slowly, very slowly, a fragile connection was rebuilding. Mom called again yesterday. Adana told her father one evening. The word mom in reference to Zainab was new, hard won after months of Zainab or she. How did it go? Better. She told me about her life in London, her job, her stepkids. She's getting divorced, actually, from the British guy. Obi was surprised. She is? Yeah. She said she realized she ran away to that relationship to escape the pain of our divorce, that she never properly dealt with her feelings. She's in therapy now, too. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Part of me thinks it's too little, too late. But part of me hopes that if she deals with her issues, maybe we can actually have a relationship someday. A real one, not built on guilt and obligation. Do you want that? A relationship with her? Adana was quiet for a long moment. I think so. Eventually. She made horrible choices, but she's still my mother. And unlike Oluchi, she seems genuinely sorry. She's doing the work to change. That has to count for something. You're very wise for 13, Obi said. Trauma ages you, Adana replied with a wry smile. At school, things were improving too. Adana had made genuine friends, girls who knew about her past but didn't define her by it. They invited her to birthday parties and shopping trips and movie nights. Normal teenage activities that felt extraordinary after years of isolation and abuse. Her best friend, a girl named Amara, came over one Saturday for homework and gossip. They were sprawled on Adana's bed, supposedly studying math, but actually talking about everything else, when Amara brought up something that had been on her mind. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Do you hate her? Your stepmom? Adana considered the question carefully. Sometimes. When I have nightmares or panic attacks, when something triggers a memory. Yes, in those moments I hate her. But mostly, I just feel sad. She had the chance to be someone important in my life. She could have been a mentor, a friend, maybe even like a mother. Instead, she chose cruelty. And now her life is ruined, and mine was damaged. And for what? What did any of that pain accomplish? That's really mature. Dr. Ngozi says holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Oluchi is in prison. She's facing consequences. Me hating her doesn't hurt her. It only hurts me. So I'm working on letting go of the hate and replacing it with, I don't know, maybe pity, maybe just indifference. I couldn't do that. If someone hurt me like that, I'd want revenge forever. I got my revenge, Adana said quietly. She's in prison for 15 years. Her reputation is destroyed. She lost everything. That's revenge enough. Now I just want to move on with my life. But moving on was harder than it sounded. 8 months after the trial, Adana had her first major setback. It started with a news article. A women's rights group had taken up Oluchi's cause, claiming she'd been unfairly convicted based on biased testimony. They were organizing protests, calling for her release, painting her as a victim of a patriarchal system that always believed men over women. The article featured interviews with Oluchi from prison, where she maintained her innocence. I tried to help that girl, she said to the camera. I tried to give her structure and discipline. And this is how she repays me? By destroying my life with lies. When Adana saw the article, she had the worst panic attack in months. She couldn't breathe. The room spun. She ended up in the emergency room, where doctors confirmed it was anxiety-related but wanted to keep her for observation. Obi was furious. He called his lawyer immediately. Can we sue for defamation? For harassment? Something. Unfortunately, Oluchi has the right to maintain her innocence and appeal her conviction, and advocacy groups have the right to support whoever they choose. It's disgusting, yes, but not illegal. So she gets to continue victimizing my daughter, even from prison? I'm sorry, Obi, but yes, the only thing we can do is ignore it and trust that reasonable people will see through her lies. But ignoring it was easier said than done. The protests gained traction. Social media became a battleground. Adana's friend showed her supportive messages, but she also saw the cruel comments. She lied for attention. Father and daughter conspired to get rid of an innocent woman. Rich people think they can destroy anyone. How can they believe her? Adana asked Dr. Ngozi in an emergency session. There was a trial. There was evidence. Video evidence. How can anyone think she's innocent? Because people are complicated, Dr. Ngozi said. Some genuinely believe in supporting women, even when those women are guilty. Others are conspiracy theorists who distrust the justice system. And some just enjoy being contrarian. But Adana, here's what matters. The jury, who saw all the evidence and heard all the testimony, convicted her. The judge, who reviewed everything carefully, sentenced her. Those are the people whose opinions matter. Random strangers on the internet don't get to rewrite your truth. It feels like I'm being abused all over again, like she's still controlling my life, still hurting me. That's a valid feeling. But remember, she's in prison. She lost. You won. This is just noise. Painful noise, yes, but ultimately meaningless. She can protest from her cell all she wants. It doesn't change the reality of what she did or the justice you received. The controversy eventually died down as other news stories took over the media cycle. But the experience left Adana shaken and taught her an important lesson. Justice in a courtroom doesn't always translate to justice in the court of public opinion. Some people will never believe you, her father said one evening. Some people will always find reasons to doubt or question or minimize what happened to you. But you can't control what other people think. You can only control your own truth and how you live your life. I want to do something, Adana said suddenly. Something positive. Something that takes what happened to me and turns it into something good. Like what? I don't know yet. But there has to be a way to help other kids like me. Kids who are being abused and don't know how to speak up. Kids who are suffering in silence. Obi smiled. I think that's a wonderful goal. Let's work on it together. Over the next few months, father and daughter began developing an idea. They would start a foundation, the Adana Foundation for Child Protection. It would focus on education, prevention, and support for abuse victims. We could have programs in schools, Adana suggested excitedly, teaching kids about the difference between discipline and abuse, teaching them that they have the right to speak up, teaching them who to tell and how to get help. We could also support organizations that do home visits. Obi added, random wellness checks for children in vulnerable situations, and fund therapy for kids who've been abused but can't afford treatment. And a hotline, a 24/7 hotline where kids can call if they're scared or in danger. They work with lawyers and child welfare experts to develop the foundation's mission and programs. The official launch was set for 1 year after the trial verdict. Symbolic timing that marked Adana's journey from victim to survivor to advocate. But there was one more piece of unfinished business. Zainab. 15 months after their first post-scandal conversation, Zainab flew to Lagos for a face-to-face visit. She'd completed a year of intensive therapy and wanted to ask Adana something in person. They met at a neutral location, a cafe overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. Adana brought Obi for support, but he sat at a different table, giving mother and daughter space. You look good, Zainab said, tears already in her eyes. Healthy, strong. I'm so glad. Thank you. I need to say something, and I don't want you to feel pressured to respond any particular way. I've been working with my therapist on taking accountability without demanding forgiveness. So here it is. I'm deeply, profoundly sorry for abandoning you. There's no excuse. I was hurting and broken, and I chose to run away rather than face my failures as a mother and wife. That was selfish and wrong, and it left you vulnerable to someone who hurt you terribly. I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. Adana listened quietly, her face unreadable. Zainab continued, I'm not asking you to forgive me or even have a relationship with me. I just need you to know that what happened was not your fault. You were a beautiful, lovable child who deserved better from both your parents. I failed you and I'm sorry. Are you finished? Adana asked. Zainab nodded. Okay, here's what I need to say. I'm not ready to forgive you yet. Maybe someday, but not today. You left me when I needed you most, and the consequences of that abandonment were severe. I suffered because you weren't there. Zainab's tears flowed freely, but she nodded. But Adana continued, I appreciate that you're in therapy. I appreciate that you're taking accountability. And I appreciate that you've kept your promise to call every week. That consistency has meant something. So while I'm not ready to have you be my mom again, I don't even know if that's possible. I'm open to seeing where our relationship can go. We can keep talking, keep building, and maybe eventually we'll find something that works for both of us. That's more than I deserve, Zainab whispered. Probably, Adana agreed, but there was the hint of a smile. But Dr. Ngozi says healing isn't about what people deserve. It's about what I need to move forward. And I think I need to at least try to have some kind of relationship with you, because you're still my mother, even if you weren't there when I needed you. And I don't want to carry around the weight of that loss forever. Thank you, Zainab said. Thank you for giving me a chance. I promise I'll do everything I can to earn your trust back. We'll see, Adana said, but it wasn't said harshly. It was said with cautious hope. That night, Adana talked with her father about the meeting. How do you feel about it? Obi asked, scared, hopeful, cautious. I don't trust her yet, but I want to believe that people can change, that someone who made terrible mistakes can learn from them and become better. If I can't believe that, then what hope is there for anyone? That's very wise. I learned it from you. You made mistakes too. Prioritizing work over family, trusting the wrong person, not seeing what was happening to me. But you've changed. You've become the father I needed. If you can change, maybe she can too. Obi pulled his daughter into a hug. I'm so proud of the person you're becoming. Strong, compassionate, wise beyond your years. Trauma either breaks you or makes you stronger, Adana said. I'm choosing stronger. As the 1-year anniversary of the verdict approached, preparations for the foundation launch intensified. Adana would give a speech at the event, sharing her story publicly in a more detailed way than she had before. Writing that speech was one of the hardest things she'd ever done. She worked with Dr. Ngozi to determine what to include, how much detail to share, how to balance being honest about the trauma while not re-traumatizing herself or the audience. The night before the launch, Adana practiced her speech for her father one final time. My name is Adana Okafor. I'm 14 years old. And when I was 12, my stepmother abused me for 18 months while my father traveled for work. Her voice was steady as she continued, sharing key moments of her story. Not every detail, but enough to illustrate the reality of child abuse. The speech concluded with a powerful call to action. I was one of the lucky ones. My father came home early. He believed me. He fought for justice despite the personal cost. But not every child is that lucky. Some children suffer for years. Some never get rescued. Some don't survive. That's why this foundation exists, to reach the children who can't reach out themselves, to give voice to the voiceless, to protect the vulnerable, and to make sure that no child ever has to endure what I endured in silence. When she finished, Obi was crying. That's perfect. You're going to change lives with those words. I hope so. Because if something good can come from all that pain, then maybe it wasn't completely meaningless. The foundation launch was a massive success. Over 300 people attended, including child welfare advocates, government officials, educators, and abuse survivors. Media coverage was extensive and positive. Donations poured in. But the most meaningful moment came after Adana's speech, when a girl about her age approached her quietly. My name is Ifioma, the girl whispered. I heard what you said about speaking up, about telling someone, and I need to tell you something. My uncle, he's been hurting me, and I don't know what to do. Adana's heart broke for this girl, even as she felt a surge of purpose. This was why she'd shared her story. This was the good that could come from pain. She took Ifeoma's hand and led her to one of the foundation's staff members, a trained social worker. "We're going to help you," Adana promised. "Right now, today, you're not alone anymore." Watching the social worker immediately spring into action, calling authorities, contacting Child Protective Services, ensuring Ifeoma's safety, Adana felt something shift inside her. The pain of her past would always be part of her story, but it wouldn't define her story. She was more than what had been done to her. She was what she chose to do with it. That night, lying in her bed in her own room, not the storage room, never the storage room again, Adana reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. From victim to survivor to advocate, from broken to healing to helping others heal. She still had nightmares sometimes. She still had panic attacks. She still carried scars that would never fully disappear. But she also had hope and purpose and a future, and that was everything. Adana is thriving. From victim to advocate, she's turning her pain into purpose. But there's still one more chapter, the final chapter showing where life takes her. Don't miss the powerful conclusion to this incredible story. Like this video. Subscribe to African Tales by Zion and turn on notifications of the final chapter. What do you think happens next? Drop your predictions. 5 years after the trial that changed everything, Adana Okafor stood in front of a university lecture hall, preparing to give a presentation for her social work class. She was 18 now, poised and confident in ways that would have seemed impossible during those dark 18 months of abuse. The assignment was to present a case study on Child Protective Services. Most students had chosen theoretical examples from textbooks. Adana had chosen her own story. "Child abuse statistics are staggering," she began, her voice clear and professional. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before age 18. Millions more suffer physical or emotional abuse. But statistics don't tell the full story. So today, I want to tell you about a real case. My case. She clicked to the first slide. A photo of herself at 12, thin and haunted looking, taken during the medical examination after her rescue. This is me 5 years ago. I weighed 65 pounds. I had 17 visible bruises. I was severely malnourished and dehydrated. I'd been sleeping on a mat in a storage room and eating scraps for 18 months. My stepmother did this to me while my father traveled for work. The classroom was dead silent. Her classmates, who'd known Adana as the bright, friendly girl in their cohort, stared at the screen in shock. I share this not for sympathy, but it illustrates several critical failures in the child protection system. First, community awareness. Multiple people suspected something was wrong. A neighbor heard crying, "My former housekeeper witnessed abuse." My teachers noticed behavioral changes. But no one reported it. They didn't want to interfere. They weren't sure. They thought someone else would handle it. She advanced the slides, showing statistics on unreported abuse. Second, the abuse was hidden by socioeconomic status. We lived in a wealthy neighborhood. My father is a prominent businessman. People assume that wealth equals safety. It doesn't. Abuse happens in mansions and gated communities just as often as anywhere else. Third, the abuser was skilled at manipulation. She created a perfect facade for my father, loving wife, caring stepmother. She coached me to lie on video calls. She isolated me from potential help. This is common in abuse cases. Abusers are often charming, respected members of the community. Adana clicked to a slide showing a timeline. I was rescued because of 3 things. My father came home early, my uncle had documented evidence, and a witness was willing to testify. But what about children whose parents never come home early, who have no uncle gathering evidence, who have no witnesses willing to speak up? She presented her proposed solutions: mandatory reporter training for all adults who interact with children, random wellness checks for vulnerable households, better funding for Child Protective Services, and comprehensive education in schools about recognizing and reporting abuse. When she finished, the class erupted in questions. Her professor, Dr. Chukwu, looked at her with new respect. After class, several students approached her. "I had no idea," one girl said. "You're always so happy and put together. I never would have guessed you went through something like that." That's the point, Adana said gently. Abuse survivors don't look a certain way. We're your classmates, your co-workers, your neighbors. You can't tell by looking. That's why awareness and education are so important. That evening, Adana had dinner with her father at their favorite restaurant, a tradition they'd maintained throughout her high school years and now into university. At 18, she'd chosen to attend the University of Lagos so she could stay close to home, close to the foundation she'd helped build, and close to the father who'd proven his love in the way that mattered most, showing up. How was the presentation? Obi asked. Good. Hard, but good. I think I reached some people. I'm sure you did. You've always had a gift for helping people understand. Adana smiled. Speaking of which, the foundation has been asked to testify before the National Assembly. They're considering new legislation on child protection, and they want input from organizations doing the work. Are you going to do it? I think so. It's been 5 years. I'm ready to speak to lawmakers about what needs to change. Obi reached across the table and squeezed his daughter's hand. Your mother will be proud. Both of them. The mention of mothers, plural, was deliberate. Over the past 5 years, Adana had slowly, carefully rebuilt a relationship with Zainab. They spoke weekly, sometimes daily. Zainab had flown to Lagos for Adana's high school graduation and cried through the entire ceremony. They weren't as close as they'd once been. That trust had been shattered and couldn't be fully restored. But they had something real now, built on honesty and consistent effort rather than biological obligation. Zainab called today. Adana said, she wanted to tell me she's engaged. How do you feel about that? Happy for her. She seems genuinely happy, and her fiancé sounds like a good man. She's invited me to the wedding. Are you going to go? Yes, I think I am. Adana paused. You know what's weird? 5 years ago, I couldn't imagine ever forgiving her for leaving me. But now, I understand that people are complicated. That someone can love you and still make terrible mistakes. That trauma and pain can make people run instead of fight. She's been working hard to rebuild our relationship, and I respect that. You're very mature for 18. Trauma aged me, but also, Dr. Ngozi has been invaluable. Adana still saw her therapist monthly, less frequently than the twice-weekly sessions of those early years, but consistently. Healing, she'd learned, wasn't a destination you reached. It was an ongoing journey. Have you heard anything about Oluchi? Obi asked carefully. They didn't often discuss her anymore, but sometimes it was necessary. She's up for parole review next year, Adana said, her voice steady. She served 6 years of her 15-year sentence. The parole board contacted me asking if I want to make a statement. Do you? I don't know yet. Part of me thinks she should serve every single day of her sentence. But part of me wonders if that's about justice or revenge. I need to think about it more. Whatever you decide, I support you. They finished dinner and drove home through Lagos's chaotic traffic. The city had changed in 5 years. New buildings, new roads, new energy. And so had they. The Okafor Foundation for Child Protection had become one of the most respected child welfare organizations in the region. It operated a 24/7 hotline that received hundreds of calls monthly. It had programs in 50 schools teaching children about personal safety and how to report abuse. It funded therapy for abuse survivors from low-income families. And it had successfully lobbied for 3 new laws strengthening child protection. Adana served on the board and worked there part-time while completing her university degree. She'd found her calling, helping children who were going through what she'd survived. One day at the foundation office, a call came through that would prove how far she'd come. A 13-year-old girl named Blessing had reported that her stepfather was abusing her. The family was wealthy, well-connected. No one believed her. The school counselor thought she was exaggerating. Child Protective Services had done a cursory investigation and found no evidence of abuse. I'll take this case, Adana said immediately when she heard the details. It was too familiar, too close to her own story. She worked with the foundation's legal team and social workers to build a case. They interviewed Blessing extensively. They documented her injuries. They talked to neighbors and teachers. They gathered evidence methodically, and when they were ready, they went to the authorities, not the local office that had dismissed Blessing's claims, but directly to the state level, using the foundation's connections and credibility. 3 weeks later, Blessing was removed from the home and placed with a safe relative. Her stepfather was arrested, and a terrified 13-year-old girl got the protection and validation that Adana knew, from painful experience, could save a life. "Thank you," Blessing whispered when Adana visited her at her aunt's house. "No one believed me. They said I was lying. But you believed me. I know what it's like not to be believed," Adana said gently. "I know what it's like to feel invisible and powerless. But you're not invisible anymore. You're safe now, and we're going to make sure you stay safe." Watching Blessing begin to heal, watching her gain weight, smile more, slowly start to trust again, felt like closing circle. Adana had been rescued, and now she was rescuing others. The parole hearing came 11 months after that dinner conversation. Adana decided to attend and make a statement, not out of revenge, but out of responsibility to future children who might be vulnerable if Oluchi was released. Obi went with her for support. So did Emeka, and surprisingly, so did Zainab, who'd flown in from London specifically for this. "You don't have to be here," Adana told her mother. "Yes, I do," Zainab said firmly. "I wasn't there when you needed me before. I'm here now." The parole hearing was held in a small, sterile room at the prison. The parole board sat at a long table. Oluchi was brought in, wearing prison clothes, her hair now showing streaks of gray, her face harder than Adana remembered. When their eyes met, Adana felt nothing. No fear, no anger, just a distant sort of sadness for what could have been, but never was. Oluchi spoke first, reading from a prepared statement about rehabilitation and remorse and readiness to rejoin society. It was polished practice and utterly unconvincing. Then it was Adana's turn. She stood, her statement in hand, but she didn't look at the paper. She looked directly at the parole board. "My name is Adana Okafor. 6 years ago, Oluchi Okafor tortured me for 18 months. She starved me, beat me, locked me in dark rooms, made me sleep on a mat like an animal, and she did it all while presenting herself to the world as a loving stepmother. She is a skilled manipulator who shows remorse only when it benefits her. I don't make this statement out of revenge. I've built a good life despite what she did to me. I'm in university studying social work. I run a foundation that helps abused children. I have loving relationships with both my parents. She didn't break me, but I make this statement out of concern for the next child who might be vulnerable to her. Nothing in her statement suggests genuine remorse or understanding of the gravity of what she did. She served only 6 years of a 15-year sentence for systematically abusing a child. That's not enough. Children need to be protected from people like her, and releasing her early send a message that abusing children isn't that serious. I ask that you deny her parole. Let her serve her full sentence. And maybe, by the time she's released, she'll have had enough time to truly understand the damage she caused." Adana sat down. Oluchi's lawyer tried to rebut, painting her as a changed woman who'd found religion in prison. But the parole board's faces were skeptical. The decision came 3 days later. Parole denied. Oluchi would serve at least 3 more years before being eligible for another hearing. "How do you feel?" Zainab asked when Adana shared the news. "Relieved, validated, and ready to move on with my life." 2 months after the parole hearing, on Adana's 19th birthday, her family gathered for a celebration. Obi was there, of course. Emeka with a terrible joke and an expensive gift. Zainab, who brought Adana's half-siblings from London, the children from her second marriage, who were shy but sweet. Chinyu, who'd made all of Adana's favorite foods. Dr. Ngozi, who become more friend than therapist over the years. Aunt Patience, who become a steady, loving presence in their home. And Adana's university friends, who filled the house with laughter and music. Looking around at all these people who loved her, supported her, believed in her, Adana felt overwhelmed with gratitude. After everyone left, she sat with her father on the terrace, watching the sun set over Lagos. "Can I tell you something?" Adana asked, always. For a long time after the trial, I felt defined by what happened to me. I was the abused girl, the survivor, even the advocate, and those are all true. But lately, I've been feeling like I'm more than that. Like I'm just Adana, someone who had terrible things happen to her, yes, but also someone who has friends and hobbies and dreams and a whole life that has nothing to do with abuse or trauma. That's beautiful, Obi said. I think it means I'm healing. Really healing. Not just surviving or coping, but actually becoming whole again. Or maybe not again, maybe for the first time, because I was so young when everything went wrong. Maybe I'm finally becoming the person I was always meant to be. I see that. You're confident, happy, purposeful. You've taken something horrific and transformed it into a calling. But you're right. You're also just a 19-year-old who likes art and loud music and staying up too late with her friends. You're both things. And that's okay. Dad. Yeah, princess. Thank you for choosing me, for fighting for justice, even when it costs you business relationships and money, for showing up every day, for believing me, for being the father I needed. You're easy to show up for, Obi said, his voice thick with emotion. You're remarkable, Adana, and I'm honored to be your father. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the house, music played. Chinya was singing while cleaning up. The sound of life and love and normalcy filled the air. 5 years ago, Adana had knelt on a kitchen floor in a gray uniform, believing she was worthless, believing she deserved the abuse, believing no one would ever save her. But she'd been saved. And more than that, she'd saved herself by finding the courage to speak her truth. Now, at 19, she sat on a terrace in her own home, surrounded by people who loved her, working toward a purpose that mattered and building a life worth living. The scars remained. Some wounds never fully healed. She still had occasional nightmares. She still tensed when she saw wooden spoons. She still carried the weight of trauma that would never fully disappear. But she also carried hope and strength and the absolute certainty that she was valuable, worthy, and loved.